April 1945. The Third Reich is in its death throes. The thunder of Soviet artillery to the east is matched by the relentless advance of the Western Allies. For those in German uniform, the future is a terrifying void. Capture by the Soviets means almost certain death, or a fate worse than death in the gulags. Capture by the Americans or British? Rumors swirl. Stories of vengeance, of mistreatment, of the brutal justice awaiting those who served the Nazi regime. This is the mindset, the chilling expectation, of hundreds of German medical personnel as the front collapses around them. Among them are 500 women. Not soldiers with rifles, but nurses and medics of the German Red Cross and the Wehrmacht's medical services. They have spent the war saving lives, operating in field hospitals under hellish conditions, binding the wounds of a crumbling army. Now they are trapped. Their war is over. And they must make a choice: flee into the unknown and face the Red Army or surrender to the Americans. They choose surrender, steeling themselves for the brutality they are certain awaits them. They expected hatred. They expected retribution. They expected to be treated as the enemy they, by uniform, were. What they received was bacon and coffee. This is the story of when 500 German nurses surrendered in the spring of 1945, and how the rations they were given changed everything. To understand the profound shock of this moment, we must first step into the boots of these women and the chaotic landscape of Germany in April 1945. The location is likely somewhere in central or southern Germany. American spearheads, primarily from General George S. Patton's brilliant, relentless Third Army and elements of General Alexander Patch's Seventh Army, are slicing through the remaining German defenses with dizzying speed. German military units are a patchwork of shattered regular army divisions, Volkssturm militiamen, old men and boys, and desperate SS holdouts. Order has broken down. The German state has ceased to function. In the midst of this chaos are the military hospitals. These are often set up in commandeered schools, castles, or municipal buildings. They are overflowing with casualties from the relentless Allied air campaign and the bloody ground battles. The medical staff, doctors, surgeons, nurses, and orderlies, are operating on a knife edge of exhaustion and dwindling supplies. Anesthesia is scarce. Bandages are reused. Antibiotics are a fantasy. They work by candlelight as the power grid fails, their world reduced to the next wounded man on the table. Our subjects, the 500 nurses, are part of this broken system. They are not Nazi fanatics. Most are young women, conscripted into service, who have seen the worst humanity can offer. They have held the hands of dying teenagers, assisted in amputations without proper drugs, and witnessed the complete physical destruction of the German army. Their loyalty is not to Hitler or the party, but to their Hippocratic oath and the men in their care. By mid-April, the warning comes: the Americans are coming. For days, they've heard the stories broadcast by Nazi propaganda. The Amos are barbarians. They shoot prisoners. They loot and rape. They show no mercy. And for these medical personnel, there is an added layer of fear. They have also heard, with much more credibility, the stories from the Eastern Front. They know what has happened to German civilians and soldiers who fell into Soviet hands. The mind rationalizes. Perhaps the Western Allies are not as brutal as the Soviets, but war is war. They are the enemy. They will treat us as such. The commanding officer, perhaps a senior doctor or a military administrator, makes the fateful decision. They will not attempt a futile escape. They will not force their wounded to be moved. They will surrender the hospital en masse. White sheets are hung from the windows. The medical staff, in their distinctive gray or white smocks, some with the Red Cross armband, assemble in the courtyard or front of the building. They wait, hearts pounding, hands clenched, awaiting the first American jeep, the first hardened GI, to decide their fate. The tension in those final hours is a physical, suffocating presence. Let us reconstruct the scene. The hospital is an island of terrified stillness in a sea of retreat. From outside, the nurses can hear the sounds of an army disintegrating, the sporadic crackle of small arms fire as rearguard units make a futile stand, the rumble of panzers being abandoned and blown up by their own crews, the distant, ever-present drone of Allied fighter-bombers, the dreaded J-bows, hunting anything that moves. But inside the hospital walls, there is a grim, quiet order. The wounded, sensing the end, are silent or praying. The doctors ensure medical records are in order. The nurses make final rounds, trying to offer some feeble comfort, their own fear mirrored in the eyes of their patients. They gather their few personal belongings. A photograph of a loved one, probably missing or dead. A diary. A small keepsake. They don their cleanest uniforms, a futile attempt at professionalism in the face of captivity. They line up, not as a military formation, but as a group of exhausted, frightened civilians in uniform. The senior medical officer, perhaps a stabsarzt, a staff surgeon equivalent to a major, stands at the front, holding a hastily made white flag attached to a broom handle. Time stretches. An hour passes. Then another. Every engine sound from the road sends a jolt through the group. Is it the Americans? Or is it a rogue SS unit that sees their white flag as treason and is coming to punish them? The fear is dual-pronged. Finally, the sound they've been dreading and anticipating arrives. Not the roar of tanks, but the distinctive high whine of Jeep engines and the deeper rumble of a truck. Gravel crunches in the driveway. American voices, sharp and unfamiliar, call out. Boots hit the ground. The first Americans appear. These are not fresh-faced recruits. These are men of the 3rd Army Spearhead Units, veterans of Normandy, the Falaise Gap, the brutal fighting in the Hurtgen Forest and the Battle of the Bulge. They are lean, tough and wary. Their uniforms are faded and stained. Their helmets are scuffed. They carry their M1 Garand and Thompson submachine guns at the ready, eyes constantly scanning windows, doorways, the crowd of Germans. They have seen too many ambushes, too many booby traps, too many fanatical last stands to let their guard down. The lead American, probably a lieutenant or a sergeant, approaches the German officer. The surrender is formal, terse. The German explains this is a military hospital, points out the wounded, identifies the staff. The American NCO or officer barks orders to his men. Squads fan out to secure the building, checking for weapons for hidden soldiers. The GIs move with professional efficiency, but their expressions are hard, unreadable. The nurses watch this, interpreting every stern glance, every barked command as confirmation of their worst fears. They see the Americans taking up positions. They see the machine gun mounted on a jeep trained vaguely in their direction. They are ordered to remain where they are. To not move. This is it, they think. The processing. The humiliation. Then the trucks to the POW cages. Or worse. But then something shifts. The initial, tense security sweep concludes. The American officer in charge, having confirmed this is indeed a medical facility and not a combat position, seems to relax, if only marginally. He confers with his medics, who are already moving into the hospital to assess the German wounded. There is a change in the American's demeanor. The aggressive posture softens into one of professional assessment. The German staff watches, bewildered, as American combat medics, men with a red cross on their helmets and armbands, begin to interact with their patients. They see these enemy medics checking bandages, feeling for pulses, speaking in calm tones. There is no violence, no shouting. Just a grim, shared understanding of the medical reality before them. For the German nurses, this is the first crack in the wall of their terror. But the core fear remains. This is just for the wounded, they think. For us, the staff, the rules will be different. We are able-bodied prisoners of war. We expect the standard fare, a cramped holding area, minimal food, perhaps interrogation. We are prepared for hardship. We are prepared for the bare minimum required by the Geneva Convention, if that. They are then separated, likely by the American MPs who have arrived with the follow-on units. The nurses are formed into a group. Instructions are given through an interpreter or a German-speaking GI. They are to be moved to a temporary holding area, a collection point for disarmed personnel. The march or short truck ride is a blur of anxiety. They arrive at what might be a nearby field, a factory yard, or a large farm complex already being used as a makeshift POW processing point. The scene is one of controlled chaos. Thousands of German soldiers, dejected, sitting in rows under the watchful eyes of American guards. The nurses are placed in their own section. And then they wait again. The hours crawl by. Hunger, a constant companion for months in wartime Germany, gnaws at them. Thirst parches their throats. The uncertainty is torture. This is the crisis point. Not of battle but of the human spirit. The crushing weight of expectation versus an unknown reality. The nurses sit on the cold ground, huddled together for warmth and comfort. They watch the American guards. They see the jeeps driving back and forth. They see the efficient, impersonal machinery of the American war machine processing the endless stream of prisoners. They are a statistic now. 500 more mouths to feed, 500 more bodies to account for. Their minds race. What will happen to them? Will they be shipped to camps in France? To the United States? Will they be handed over to the French or British, who may have scores to settle? Will they be subjected to reprisals for the crimes of the regime they served, however indirectly? Every story they've ever heard about prisoners of war, the starvation in Soviet camps, the harsh conditions for Allied POWs in Germany, comes flooding back. Their future seems to be a gray, indefinite stretch of deprivation and shame. The landscape around them reinforces this despair. Germany is in ruins. Cities are bombed-out skeletons. Farms are stripped bare. The infrastructure is gone. Even their captors, the Americans, are living on shipped-in supplies. Surely, they reason, the prisoners will get the dregs. The leftovers. The food unfit for the victors. They expect a thin, watery soup. A hard, stale biscuit. Perhaps some ersatz coffee made from acorns. This is what they have known for years. This is what war provides. They see American soldiers opening their own rations nearby. The smell, unfamiliar, rich, alien, wafts over on the breeze. It's the smell of real coffee, of fried meat, of chocolate and cigarettes. It is the smell of a world of plenty they have not known since the early days of the war, a world that now seems to belong to another planet. That smell is a cruel reminder of their status. They are the defeated, the condemned. They will watch their victors feast while they starve. The afternoon wears on. The processing continues. Then, an American sergeant or a junior officer walks over to their section, accompanied by a couple of GIs carrying large, heavy cardboard boxes. The boxes are marked with unmistakable stencils, U.S. Army. The guards say something. An interpreter translates, "You will be fed. Line up." This is it. The moment of truth. The physical manifestation of their new status. The women stand, forming ragged lines, their eyes fixed on the boxes. What will emerge? The promised watery soup? A handful of hardtack. The American soldiers open the boxes. And what they pull out is not what anyone expected. The first item distributed is not food, but something equally symbolic: cigarettes. Lucky Strikes or Camels. For years, these had been luxury items on the black market, the ultimate currency. The Americans hand them out matter-of-factly, not as a reward but simply as part of the ration. The nurses take them stunned. This alone is a shock. But then comes the food. The GIs begin handing out individual K-ration or C-ration boxes. To the German nurses, these are objects of mysterious abundance. They are shown how to open them. Inside they find a small can of pork loaf, or more likely the famed chopped ham and eggs. Bacon in a preserved, portable form. Hardtack biscuits, but of a quality and substance far superior to the Zwieback they were used to. A bar of chocolate, real sweet milk chocolate. A packet of instant coffee, a technological marvel in itself, along with sugar and creamer. Chewing gum. Fruit bars. Perhaps even a small tin of cheese or peanut butter. For the German nurses, this is not just food. This is an impossibility. This is a surplus of calories and luxury they have not seen in half a decade. They look at the American guards, expecting a trick, a cruel joke. But the GIs are already moving on, distributing the boxes without ceremony. This is routine for them. This is standard issue. The true turning point, the moment that shatters their entire worldview, comes with the coffee. Using their issued canteen cups or cups provided by the Americans, they are directed to a field kitchen or a large thermos can. Hot water is poured over the instant coffee powder. The rich, aromatic smell, the real smell of coffee, fills the air around their group. They add the sugar, the creamer. They take their first sip. That taste, that warmth. It is more than sustenance. It is a message. A message delivered not in words but in protein, sugar, and caffeine. The message is simple and it is earth-shattering. You are human beings. You are not animals to be brutalized. You are prisoners, yes, but you will be treated with a basic humanity that your own regime abandoned long ago. The psychological impact is immediate and profound. The rigid posture of fear begins to melt. Tears, held back for hours, days, years, begin to flow, not tears of despair but of overwhelming, confused relief. They look at the American guards not as monstrous conquerors, but as young men, tired like them, who are simply following orders that include feeding their prisoners. The myth of the barbaric Ami evaporates in the steam rising from their coffee cups. They share the chocolate. They trade items. They eat the rich, salty bacon product, a taste of fat and protein their malnourished bodies desperately crave. The atmosphere transforms from one of terrified suspense to one of quiet, disbelieving gratitude. This act, the provision of standard U.S. Army rations, was not an act of special kindness or pity. It was policy. The United States Army, for all its might, operated within a framework of logistics and regulations. The Geneva Convention stipulated the feeding of prisoners. The U.S. supply lines, the legendary Red Ball Express, and the sheer productive might of the American homeland, made it possible to follow that regulation to the letter, even with surplus. For the GIs, it was easier to hand out a prepackaged ration box than to cook up a separate, inferior meal. But for the recipients, the context made it miraculous. They had prepared for the basest cruelty. They received, instead, the bland efficiency of American logistics, which to them felt like magnanimity. The bacon and coffee were not just food, they were the first bricks in the reconstruction of a shattered reality. They were proof that the world outside the Nazi nightmare still operated on rules, on a scale of decency they had forgotten existed. The story of these 500 nurses does not end with that meal. They were processed, moved to proper POW camps for non-commissioned officers and female auxiliaries, likely in places like Lorraine or even later in the United States. Their treatment, following this first shock, remained consistent with the standards of the Western Allies. They were not subjected to systematic abuse. They were eventually repatriated to a destroyed, occupied Germany, where they faced the arduous task of rebuilding their lives and their nation. But the legacy of that day in April 1945 is not found in official after-action reports or medal citations. There were no medals for handing out rations. No headlines celebrated this act. Its legacy is etched in human memory and in the broader historical narrative of Germany's defeat and rebirth. For these women, that moment became a foundational story they told their children and grandchildren. It was the day the war truly ended for them, not with a bang, but with the quiet pop of a ration can being opened. It was their first lesson in what would become a central pillar of the post-war order: reconciliation. They became living witnesses to the idea that the enemy was the Nazi ideology, not the German people themselves. Their personal experience became a powerful antidote to the lingering poison of Nazi propaganda and a seed for the future friendship between West Germany and the United States. On a larger scale, this small, unremarkable incident to the Americans was a potent symbol of the *good occupation*. It exemplified the psychological shock of the American encounter for ordinary Germans. They had been prepared for a Götterdämmerung, a total destruction. What they got, after the fierce fighting ended, was the Marshall Plan, the Berlin Airlift, and a chance at democracy. The bacon and coffee were a microcosm of that future. It was about abundance instead of scarcity, rules instead of terror, a mundane efficiency that promised stability. The human cost of the war for these nurses was immense. The trauma of their service, the loss of their country, the moral burden of the regime they served. They carried that forever. But the memory of their surrender, and the shocking decency that followed, offered a path forward. It proved that even in the absolute zero hour of total defeat, humanity could reassert itself in the simplest of forms. A warm meal offered without hatred. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. A story not of combat but of capture. Not of violence but of a quiet, profound mercy that helped break the cycle of hatred. It reminds us that history is written not only in the grand strategies of generals and the clashes of armies, but in the personal, unexpected moments that change a single human heart. Subscribe to World War II Vault as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.